We're now hearing from somebody else who should take a lot of pride in building up a conversion business. Rebecca Lee has hit on the perfect form of personal transport that's both good for people and good for the environment. So RevBecca, as she's known, undertook her first electric bike conversion in 2009 and then just kept on going. So 11 years on, through her business Rev Bikes, she's now enabled loads and loads of conversions. She'll be able to tell you the numbers. And it wasn't until I browsed the website of Rev Bikes that I appreciated the range of bikes that RevBecca is dealing with. Anything from different electric bikes, trikes, fat bikes, recumbents, dual trikes, pedicabs, scooters, BMXs, and downhill full suspension bikes. And really highlighted for me that it's a much more complex task than I first envisaged when I thought about it. Rebecca also organised the first EV Expo ever in Melbourne 7 years ago, and here she is to speak to you at Australia's first virtual EV Expo. I give you Rebecca Lee.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Oh, wow, that's a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. It is something that I'm very passionate about, and I hope I can share some of the images of some of the special conversions we've done recently. I'd just like to let you know the range of electric bikes that are out there is so vast. There's so many different options. I hope to be able to actually convert any bike to electric. That's my strong passion. So much like Graham in wanting to DIY and get things recycled. Also like Russell. So I'm trying to fill some shoes there that you guys are playing with bigger vehicles. My bigger vehicle is what led me into the e-bikes in the first place. So nature intervened in my life about 15 years ago and squashed my car. So that was a great segue for me into looking for alternative transport when I was actually working in sustainability at that time. So from there, I imported a kit as my friend suggested that I could, and I converted a bike to electric with his help. And decided in the end to actually form a business around that, because e-bikes at that time were very daggy, very heavy, very limited in what you could purchase. And what I could actually produce with kits was vast and phenomenal. So I kept going with it, as Natalie said. There's been a huge transition in the last few years around e-bikes. So as things progress, that's me pregnant in the Royal Auto magazine. And then for me now, what I focus on an e-bike is actually taking my little fella around, pulling a trailer with my e-bike. And this is one of the reasons why I'm a bit of an advocate for not necessarily going to the 500 watt motors all the time. There, for me, in the very hilly areas, I do use overpowered motors. And hopefully you're not going to see me end up in jail anytime soon because of that. All right, so why electric bikes? The reason, I mean, I love electric cars too, but this chart here is actually a great example of why there are so many benefits of electric bikes in terms of other vehicle forms actually use a lot more energy than when we team up a battery and a person's muscles. We get so many different benefits. When we compare e-biking to cycling, of course, there are some benefits in reducing the sweat, increasing the speed, travel further without complaints, and build up your fitness so that you can get as much or as little exercise as you want on an e-bike. You can turn it down and get as much exercise as you like. You can turn it up for those steep hills. Just going back to that, when people do compare it, this is where we see some people say that e-bikes are cheating. Okay, there are other ways of getting exercise apart from cycling. You can just cycle to get from A to B. We don't always need to get exercise through cycling. If we actually compare cycling or e-biking to driving, of course, we see which one is cheating. It's the driving, right? We're still sitting idle when we're in a car. But compared to cars, e-bikes are, of course, a lot cheaper. They actually also skip right past all the traffic jams or roadworks or that sort of thing can blow out travel times in cars, and e-bikes just give you that consistency every trip. You don't need to worry about parking with a bicycle. You park it right out the front of wherever you're going. You get less stress through exercising on your commute. And it's also, of course, very environmentally friendly, especially if you, as Graham does, charge, and as I do, charge your bike with renewable energy. Of course, comparing to public transport as well, you've just got that independence and dependability when you're on a bike, and often it's a lot faster to get places on an e-bike than public transport, especially by Australian, Melbourne's standards of public transport. Something else around e-bikes is that they're actually set to be a massive number more sales of e-bikes compared to electric cars. So they're talking about by 130 million electric bikes to be sold globally by 2023. They're talking about only 12 million electric cars in the same sort of period, or a greater period. So e-bikes fill a big gap. All right, so what I do is custom builds. We take a normal bike and we make it electric. So for example, these two different models of a very common bike, a Giant Roam. The one on the left has a mid-drive motor fitted, so at the cranks, and the one on the right has a hub motor hidden away there in the rear wheel. Both of them have got the same battery there in the frame, and the one on the right has a little controller bag in the frame as well, because that's what's required with a hub motor. A few other random things that we do fairly regularly: an Avanti step through on the left and an upright Gomia tricycle on the right. So we put a front wheel hub motor. I have one of those at home, in fact, that's a bit pimped up. We do some specialist vehicles like recumbents. So these are very, very comfortable recliner vehicles. A few bikes that we've put out in the last couple of weeks. There's another recumbent there in that lot. And then we also have, oh, that's come up twice. That's going to want to keep coming up. All right, this one's probably the highlight. So we did a custom battery build for this one, and it's got a 1,000-watt mid-drive motor in the middle as well. So that's a very exciting bike for the fella who likes to ride it in the bush and off the road only, of course. So just to have a look at for you the different types of motors. When you want to electrify a bike, you've got the choice between the two motors: a hub motor in the wheel or a mid-drive motor which is on the chainring. And as you can see on the right there, there's a choice of chainrings that you can get for those. So you can actually gear the bike as you would like to. So small chainring for lots of torque, big chainring for lots of speed, less torque. So you've got that adjustment that you can make. Some of the pros and cons of each type. We tend to sell a lot of hub motors to those who like easy, simple riding. They don't want to be thinking too much about the gears. So the hub motor is very simple to use. It's not connected to the gears at all. It can be in the front or the rear wheel. It doesn't matter. Usually in the rear wheel to push from behind, unless you've got a battery on the rear, which will make it too back heavy. And it's very light and freewheeling, this type of motor. And it's got just a couple of drawbacks. When compared to a mid-drive motor, it's not quite such a natural ride feel. It's not integrating with the choice of gears and the pedaling that you're doing necessarily. It is engaged by your pedaling. Both motors are. You've got the one drawback of having a bit of a challenge to take your wheel out in this case as well. The street legal 250-watt ones do stop at 25 k's an hour. You can't adjust that on a hub motor, whereas you can on a mid-drive. Mid-drives have a broader range of performance because the way the gears are interacting with the motor. So low gears is high torque. When you're changing gears on the back of the bike, you get to control exactly what's happening with the motor. So the integrated ones, which are coming on bikes that have been built as e-bikes, are actually torque sensing as well. Our retrofit systems don't detect torque. They just sense cadence. So long as the pedal is turning, the motor will go. It doesn't back off when you get tired and start backing off. So that's the part I like about the cadence-based sensors. It's very low and central on the frame and very customizable. But you do need to think about the gears a fair bit. So those are the limitations. We we tend to do about probably 40% hub motors and 60% mid drives now. And most of the people having hub motors tend to be women or older fellas who want a simple, enjoyable ride. We do all sorts of batteries with our system, so some ranging from under the saddle. So you've got a little bag battery with under 300 or 400 watt hours. And we've got a huge mega range battery now that's a kilowatt hour worth of energy. So this should get the user well more than 100 kilometers. So that would be the absolute minimum range of that battery there. Also some that go on a rack over the back. Not ideal for weight distribution though, really. So looking at why we would ride an e-bike and why we are here to talk about electric vehicles, because the average Australian household's emissions are very closely tied to transport. Our overall emissions, a big chunk, that orange chunk there, is related to our transport. So if we can actually get out and think outside the four-wheeled box, as I like to say, we can find alternatives for that. There's another reason why you might want to get out of a car, the traffic jams, which unfortunately electric cars don't solve or go any ways towards, unless you're talking about very small vehicles, which could potentially reduce the width of the lanes or something. I don't know. It's a bottleneck out there. So actually getting out of cars. One of the important factors for me is that we are in the midst of an obesity epidemic. And so if we actually incentivize people to get onto vehicles that allow them to do some exercise while they're getting from A to B, this is going to be extremely helpful to alleviate some of the health costs of people becoming, I guess, less active and more sedentary. So they do run on fat and save you money, e-bikes, bikes generally, in fact. And it is really a revolution. We're seeing social benefits, health benefits, cost benefits, environmental, and fun. I don't know if you've ever ridden one, but they certainly are fun. Power definitely expands what's possible by bike, but I wouldn't suggest applying it in all cases because there's some people who should not be on bikes. So that's all for my presentation. If you would like to contact me, you can feel free to look at our website, email me, or call. And we do also provide e-bike mechanic training courses now as well. So we're actually growing a dealer network that we can across Australia do conversions and installations for people. So I'm excited about that. And if you're interested, you can lodge an inquiry on our website about that too.